Welcome to the Parent Partnership Podcast. I'm really excited that you're here. Today we have Pastor Mindy.
Hello.
She has 3 children. What are the ages?
9, 7, and 9 months.
Cutie. And how long have you been doing youth ministry?
Well, I did it for almost 13 years.
And then they just stepped into
young adult
ministry.
Yes.
So that's awesome. And then this is Pastor Cole. Pastor Cole does not have children yet.
Soon though.
Not yet.
We're putting him on the chopping block.
But how long have you been in youth ministry, and then how long have you been pastoring?
In youth ministry for 6 years. Pastoring, it'll be 2 years and like less than a month.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's great. So I was a youth leader for 8 years.
Dang.
With Pastor Mindy and Pastor Cody. And then I've been a mom for my whole life. So I have 6 kids. I have a 14-year-old, a almost 13-year-old, 8-year-old, 7-year-old, 6-year-old, 5-year-old.
Just gotta think.
Did I count too many? And then 8-month-old.
Yeah.
So
1 through 20.
Something like that, yeah.
Basically.
So I have a couple teenagers now, and
she knows her way around.
Yeah, I do, something. And then I've been in children's ministry for about a year and a half now. So we have some ideas and we have some thoughts. And so today we're going to talk about friends. And I think friends is just like a huge topic.
Yeah.
I think with kids, with youth, and then merging that and kind of the effects on having and picking friends. So we're going to start a little bit with the young aspect of it. So when do you think is a good time to start connecting your kids? Like what age? Like I know there's a lot of like mom groups like, we're going to have a play date. Like when do you start taking that seriously on, I want to connect my kids?
Yeah. I mean, I think it starts right from as early as you can. You know, I think the earlier that you have your kids interact, even with babies, you know, babies can connect. I know it's a weird thing and they might not say anything or might just grab each other's pacifiers like our kids do, but
it's cute.
I think it's important. You know, I think I've seen where people have waited.
Yeah.
And they wait till their child is a toddler and then they try to introduce them and they're scared. They don't want to be around the other kid. They're not very friendly. So I think it's just really important to start as soon as you can.
Yeah, that socialization, like especially if you have only one child right now, socializing your kids is a big deal. And even if they don't play with each other, they're used to each other in the room. And once they hit a certain age, they are going to start to interact. But the Bible says a lot about friends. One of them is Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. Yeah. So like, even we have to pick our kids' friends.
Yes.
Like that's a thing.
No,
we don't just
again, because
let it happen.
That might actually stomp on someone's toes.
Yeah, we can't just
like that.
Let them make whatever friend they want. We pick their friends. You have it's like bowling. We can bowl. We're going to make friends, but I'm putting those bumpers up and there's a parameter of what you can and what you cannot do, who you can and what you can't hang out with. So, kind of what does that look like in youth ministry? Like if you have youth, what would you say to your parents are some parameters on letting your youth hang out with other youth?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would say it can very quickly turn into something that either edifies them or tears them down.
Right.
So I would say as a parent, like, you know, from my perspective, like I said, I'm not a parent myself, but what I can see just through some trial and error or even being a son myself to my parents is like, you can't separate a tree from its fruit. Like that's just not it is. The Bible, like Jesus made it very clear. He said a good tree will bear good fruit and a bad tree will bear bad fruit. Right. And a lot of times what I'll notice is there's students that might gravitate towards each other because of personality traits. Like, hey, we both like basketball, we both like football. But I think as a parent, the real question is like, can I observe this student and see what are they producing in their life?
Right.
So if I can look and say, you know what, they don't listen during service, they don't, they're not connected in any way, shape, or form. Maybe their family isn't connected any way, shape, or form to the church. You know, I've seen some bad character traits, like they're not genuine, they're unkind. Then I'm gonna say, hey, like, as much as I have this idea of, I hope little Timmy is actually really nice and we want to think the best in people, if they're probably exemplifying these bad character traits in the open, the likelihood that they're going to teach my kid, or they're going to be there to like teach a student how to read their Bible, pray, be devoted to the Lord, is probably really low, like of a probability. It's not going to happen. You can't separate that. So, I mean, I even think it's those simple things, like, you know, like if you're a parent and you notice I'm in church on Sunday, my kid wants to hang out with all the kids in the back of the church. And the entire service that he sits with me, he's an angel. But as soon as he goes back there, he doesn't pay attention. Then I'm going to say, you know what, maybe those kids are people that I just got to keep an eye on. You know, I got to keep an eye on that relationship, mainly when it travels outside of the church. You know, we don't want to ostracize people within the church. I mean, sometimes it's just kids being kids. Like, I mean, I genuinely, like, when I was a kid, I had no ill intent. I didn't really want to be front row either. So I don't know if that's the best analogy, but the principle relies, you can't separate them from the fruit. What is the kid doing? What are they saying? How are they like? You know, and going from there.
I think one thing that we've adopted is we're kind and loving and we're friends with everyone. That's what I tell my kids. Every child is your friend. If you see someone excluded at church, if you see someone, you know, in sports, or even we joined the YMCA, if you see someone that's alone, and, you know, be their friend, be kind to them, be loving, but who we take in as our close friends, who we connect with, who we do life with, those friends are the ones that you start to sort through, because the Bible's very clear, bad company corrupts good morals.
That's good. It's true.
So it's kind of like, how do you do that? You know, if you go on a play date with a mom, and then you see this one child and they start to swear up a storm, and, you know, you're like, okay, well, maybe that's not who I want to make a play date with again, you know?
I think part of it is, I mean, I think agree with you, is like teaching them to be friendly no matter who the person is, even if they're a difficult person. But then, you know, I say this to my kids a lot, especially one of my children. In order to have friends, you have to be friendly.
That's a big one.
And if you're always being bossy and you're trying to control every situation, and they got to have it their way, or they're just not being friendly, well, you're not going to have friends, period. Proverbs 18:24, it says, friends come and friends go, but a true friend sticks by you like family. And I think teaching them to be able to identify, you know, okay, well, I think for you, you know, what characteristics in your family do you hold as like, these are non-negotiables? You know, for us, we get them out of the Bible, and we're going to be friendly. We're going to be kind to everyone, even if they're not very friendly or very kind. You know, are they trustworthy? Are they encouraging? Do they have faith? Do they, you know, based on that? And if they have the same type of characteristics,
You can do
we got it. Then, you know, then we can kind of look and teach, okay, that'd be someone to consider. You can bring in at that closer capacity, like family, right? Where then that's where we get to decide, not only for the other person, but we want them when we go through a hard thing, or our weakness is showing. They're not going to just turn their back and say, forget you. And we're not going to turn our back and say, forget you. So it's really teaching them those types of principles that, number one, be friendly, but also, are you being a worthy friend? And I think that starts at a young age.
Absolutely.
You know, I know I see adults deal with it, but I think if we start to instill in our kids how to even be a friend, and also how to look for a friend, but also how to be a friend.
Be that friend.
You can't put these expectations on somebody to be a friend if you're not also going to walk in this. So if you want them to be trustworthy, you have to be trustworthy. You know, if you don't want them to gossip about you as a friend, then you have to not gossip about them as a, you know, just, you have to teach what you want them, what they want in a friend to also be that.
Right.
And I think, you know, out of that comes those deeper relationships of like, okay, no, I want this person to be close with.
Right.
Which, you know, and I think it comes down with honesty, which is a little weird for young kids. You know, I think it's important that I think we can teach them that, but I think even for teenagers is being able to teach them, because I think a real friend you can be honest with, and they can be honest with you without you getting so butthurt that you're like, we're done.
Yeah.
You know, and I think you can teach that to even little kids.
No, I agree.
I think it's important.
And the purpose of picking friends, the purpose of teaching how to be a friend, is those friends are supposed to be in the church to sharpen one another, to have a relationship, and can help you through those difficult times.
Absolutely.
But a lot of like, as parents, what I've seen so far is we have kids in kids ministry, and then they get to teenage, all kids love, you know, church is fun, this is great, this is great. But all their friends are outside of church. So then they go from the transition from kids ministry to youth ministry, and they don't have any friends in the church. So now they already, in the most awkward time of their life, go into kids ministry feeling alone. And that's not it. Like, we have to be so intentional with our young kids. Like, we're starting from baby, toddler, elementary, right in that middle. Like, make sure they have like good connections in the church, good godly friendships, and that takes work on in the stage that we're in, because that means you have to do a play date. That means you have to be friendly.
You have to be intentional too.
You're gonna have to provide snacks. Your house is gonna get messy, or you're gonna have to go to the park, because you're gonna have to create those friendships. So when they go into youth ministry, they're connected. They already have
other
their
friends
group
that they've grown up with that are now attending in the youth ministry.
And you know, and then right through youth, get them. And this is your moment. Get them to youth group. Get them to the events. Like, have them skip their sports. Skip that.
Honestly.
Because sports, okay, then it ends. When church ends, youth group ends, then they just get to go to church on their own. And if they don't have a friend group from youth group being like, hey, where were you? I missed you. Then they have to try to do that when they're young adults. And that's even harder. So...
No, Pastor Kayla, that was me. I was that kid.
Go ahead, speak on it.
I was that kid. Hey, Jeannie Mayo has this saying, and she says it, and you know, on our leadership teams, we hear it all the time. He who spends the most time wins.
It's true.
And just like you said, you know, when we have all of these, there's so many different areas you could prioritize for a child. You know, like, I think there's this innate thing. I've seen it in my parents, and, you know, I can see it in both of you. You know, like, you just have this drive for, I want my kid to be the best. Like, I want them to have the most resources. I want them to, you know, I feel like that's just the heartbeat of every good parent. You know, it can be so easy when you're in that mindset to be like, so whatever they touch, we're going to go all in for it, you know? So it's like, we're going to get into sports. My kid's going to dominate everybody, you know? And I think just having an awareness to be like, well, what is the priority of me training my child in the way they should go right now? And the first thing that I think anyone should get is, well, my child's time is a representation of who they are. And if they spend all their time in a sport, well, then guess what? Their attitude, character, the way that they speak, the people they hang out with are going to be best represented by the people they spend the most time with. You know, but if I get my child connected to the kids ministry, to the youth ministry, to the pastors in a church, well, I know that they're going to end up exemplifying those characteristics. We were reading today, and I believe it's Proverbs 13:20 says, one who walks with wise people will he himself become wise. Right. And so it's like, well, hey, who are my children walking with? And if this church isn't established as number one, hey, let's do sports. Let's do these things. Let's hang out. Let's even build relationships with families, not in the church. Let's have a cookout. Let's have a hangout. But let's make sure we remember this before sports, before hangouts, before pool parties. This one thing's true. We walk with wise people. And in order to walk with wise people, we got to be where they're at.
That's good.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
and I would say that's a big key from kids all the way to youth.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, it's so true. It's like, you know, you can't expect you're going to have a all-star team player. And maybe they will be. Maybe they will make it. But like the point
Probably
of this
not.
podcast is, there's the real talk. The point of this podcast is for your child to grow up to follow Jesus.
Yes.
At a young age and continue through to fulfill the Great Commission, to create disciples, to love Jesus. And so that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard, so 2 things. One, the kids that don't grow up with parents that care or are intentional, or maybe they've had a really rough upbringing and maybe it wasn't completely, maybe it was one parent's fault and not the other parent's fault. There are those situations, and that falls under, we don't like you said, ostracize children and like, oh, well, you can't play with that child. We're shunning that. That is not what we're talking about here. There are times and places where you can do that. Church, invite them to church. Like any child that maybe you don't want your kid, you know, having a play date or a sleepover, invite them to church. They can go to kids' church together. They can go to youth group together. And that can be the safe, controlled atmosphere to minister to those kids, because I do let my kids have friends that I wouldn't let them become besties with for the other child's benefit.
That's
absolutely.
That's a good parent.
And none of our kids are perfect.
No, no, not at all.
But
it's like, I think it's beneficial, because then you just become so inwardly focused.
You're in a bubble.
Especially, you know, some of our kids are homeschooled. They're not really out there.
It's true.
So the church is where our goal is to get unsaved people in. And so when those unsaved kids come around or don't have the best, you don't want to just be like, no, you're never hanging out with them.
That's
don't
crazy.
really barely talk to them, right? That's wrong. That's not the heart of Jesus, number one. But do it in those, so your kid can actually model the biggest thing out of all of this. Model what you want your kids to do.
That's good. Yep.
If you're going to be a weirdo loner and not want to hang out with anyone and not have community, but then complain about not having community, but you don't want to be around anyone, or you're so particular about who you're around. Listen, I'm all on like being equally yoked up with people and all that. But sometimes we got to step outside that, you know, within boundaries and say, no, I'm going to be loving and I'm going to model this for my family and I'm going to actually be Jesus to somebody. And if that means I have to spend 2 hours out of my week at a small group or get together to socialize and actually step out and maybe hopefully draw that person over, well, then I need to expand it. But your kids, really at any age, even all the way up, I mean, while they're still living in your house, from really young to a teenager. I know teenagers would never like to admit it, but I watched my parents. I did what my parents did, you know, or didn't do. Right. So but by what you choose to model and be the example of, largely that's going to speak the largest in their life. So if you're friendly and you're outgoing and you're a community person and you're, you know, I'm going to reach out to this person even though they're difficult, and then they're going to have a better chance of doing all those same things. Yeah, absolutely. So some practical ways to implement that is you have stages of friendships. You have people who you're reaching out to essentially disciple. Is kind of like, because we're called to create disciples. So as we're doing it, as we're having a group, a church group over, you may get kids that aren't well behaved, you may get kids that aren't, but that's okay because it's in a discipleship manner. So then after the group, you can be like, you know, when your child comes to you, so-and-so they will
this, and they did that,
and they will do that. It's not a maybe, they absolutely will. And you have that moment of teaching well. They may not have gotten the teaching that you got, but you can be like this and show them how to do it the right way. And so that's kind of like a discipleship model of how you would do that. But then you have your kids that you can absolutely have over a couple times a week because you feel like that child is gonna be a good, you know, a friend, a good partner to do life with. Absolutely. Yeah, there's some kids that I'd have at my house every day just because they're easy, they're respectful, they're kind, they're building, like, So those are the ones you want to bring in close.
And how you would measure that is, number one, how does the child act in general?
Right.
Even the best children, we all have our moments. They're in general, how does that child act? And then, you know, does the other parent have the same values that you do?
Yeah.
Do they have the same type of habits that you do? Do you see anything potentially harmful? I'd like to think that this goes without saying, but I don't think that it does from a lot of the stories I used to hear in youth ministry. But there is like also the really yucky side of it where we can't just let our kids go to anybody's house.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Once you send your child to someone's house, they're open. They're open to older siblings, cousins, people who stop by, uncles, friends, aunts. The list goes on. So in this world, you do have to be very careful of where you send your children. I personally don't do sleepovers except with cousins.
Yeah.
And so we're pretty strict on that. And, you know, you can have most of your fun during the day anyways.
Absolutely.
So it just kind of minimizes any harmful things that may come.
And listen, can we just be parents who are real with our kids?
Yeah.
You don't need to be like, well, I'm not going to tell you why. No, explain to them on a level they'll understand is, listen, I'm not, because I tell my kids, I'm not doing any of this to steal your fun. I want you to have the most fun. I'm doing this to protect you. And I don't think anyone at that place is bad or evil, but I don't know about this person.
Right.
And I don't know about that person. And I would never want to put you in a position where you feel uncomfortable or something happens to you,
right?
Because I know everyone would feel bad, and it protects you, and let them know. Have these talks with your children. I think that's like kind of with the same lines we've been on, is like being the example and talking about these things, but also like when moments come up, don't shrug it off as like, I don't want to deal with this or talk about this right now. Like take the moment and talk to your kids about it. Teach them how to handle situations. Teach them why this happened. Don't just shrug things off as irritating or
because I said so.
Because I said so. Because I don't want you to. Period. Well, no. I mean, teach them why so they have understanding. I think my biggest frustration as a kid, because come from the generation of because I said so.
I do say it sometimes.
And sometimes I do say it because sometimes that is just simply what it is. I don't need to explain anything to you. True. But I think that if for some of these things that were kind of bigger deals, I think if, you know, I would have had something explained to me, I would have had a better understanding of why. And then I would have been like, oh, that makes sense. I don't want to do that. Instead of just leaving up to curiosity now.
And I'll pass it to you in a second, but let me just point this out. If you were going to have this rule, and I can say this about Pastor Mindy and myself, you have to be the fun house.
You have to be the fun house.
If you're gonna do those types of boundaries, you have to have other kids over your house. You have to get them snacks. You have to do fun things with them. You have to facilitate the friend group. You cannot isolate your kids.
And it's not based on your personality, because let me tell you, I like my house to stay like a museum.
She does.
Okay. So when I have like little kids coming over, sometimes I'm like, oh, but I'm like, nope. And then I hear that little voice in the back of my head. You have to be the fun house. You have to be the fun house. You have to be the house that all the kids want to come to. So they all grow up having fun within a safe environment that's building and loving, encouraging, that's not going to be what the world's doing. You have to.
This conversation is like so countercultural to everything. And I can almost hear the voices right now that are like, why would you ever isolate your child? But you know, as I'm listening to it, like what I think about the most is, who said that a 6-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old even has the cognitive ability to make a decision, like to make these decisions on like, who am I going to allow in my atmosphere no matter what?
Exactly.
It's like they haven't even, you know, like it's that concept like, well, I don't know the stove's hot because I haven't touched it. And how many kids have I watched flirt with danger just because they don't even understand the consequences?
It's shiny.
And like both of you are here and like as parents, you can see like well, I understand the consequences of some of these things, and how, how many things in my own life did it take 5 years to work out of me.
Right.
And it was like, well, I just was unchecked in these areas. So it's like, I also think there's an aspect like culture that's like, of course the world's going to say, well, this just sounds like it's really depressing. This just sounds like it's really secluded. This just sounds like you're micromanaging their life too much.
Sounds like a cult to me.
Right. But it's like, you know what? Maybe it's just a recognition that like, I've been through life. I've seen these things. I've watched both good and bad.
Right.
And I'm making the decision that they're not fully ready to make a decision.
Right.
Because there is coming a day where they will make a decision.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm here for, is to get them ready for that day.
Right.
But until that day, they're going to be in an atmosphere and an environment where at least they see the goodness of what this can produce.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What would you say to parents forcing their kids to go to youth group?
I would say
no, Pastor Cole.
They have no friends there because they've already made that. And would you say I should force my kids to go to youth group?
I would say number one, yes.
Okay.
But I would say hear my heart behind it.
Yeah.
So I haven't been in this place yet, but I heard someone say this and I'm like, oh, that's incredible. And I really do believe it's true. And you guys can hop in if you think whatever your thoughts are on it. But they said, you know what? I feel like I'm getting my child ready, because right now I'm in this age of I want to be like dad. I want to be like mom because they're my superhero. And they're like, but I know, because I've had children before, that there's going to come an age where it's not because dad did it, I want to do it. It's simply on influence alone that I'm going to be able to steer them in that direction. For example, like there's a lot of things now where like you have a young child and you're like, hey, do this. And they're like, oh, I see you do that. Sure, I'll do it. But then you get to around that, and I see it a lot in our students, you get to around that 12, 13-year-old age. And it's like, they don't even really know what they believe yet, but they believe it with all their heart. You know what I mean? It's like they have these super strong opinions. And what I've noticed in parents that I see make a huge difference is when parents take the role of even moving a little bit from that, well, just do it because I said it. And they're like, do it because this is the cool thing. This is the awesome thing. This is the fun thing. And it's like, I think sometimes like they lose this perspective of like, my child is someone I'm ministering to as well. And they're just a part of me. So they do what I say. And then it becomes like, no, if you want your child to start liking church, like church yourself. Right? It's like youth ministry is not a daycare. This is like, and a lot of times you'll ask parents, like, well, I drop them off and we go out and do whatever. And it's like, exactly. That's why we created a family night at our church, because we're like, hey, like, why don't you show your kid you care about church? Why don't you show your kid that you value church? Because they're going to move to that age when they come into youth ministry where they're not interested in you just being like, do it because I said it, like you were saying, which has many applicable moments.
Right, absolutely.
And one of them is go to church. I think the conversation looks more like this. Hey, we as a family value the Lord's house. We as a family need community with our fellow believers. And hey, when you're in my house, we're going to go do that. And you know what? There'll be a day where you're going to have that option. And it's my job to make sure you realize that when that day comes, there's no better place to be than the Lord's house. And so like, imagine a parent dragging themselves to church. I hate the way pastor preaches. This class is so boring. And then looking back at your child and being like, and you're going to go to youth group and like it.
And you're going to like it. You're going to do it and you're going to like it.
I don't want to hear any bad attitude. It's like, no, like, I mean, I can think of a million students who don't come and their parents are like, why aren't they coming? And I'm like, when have you been?
Question.
Like, when have you been?
Just don't be a hypocrite. I mean, I know when I was in youth ministry, I'm sorry, that was a lot. When those students would get to that place when they'd want to stop coming, because a lot of times it's not kids from the outside. It is church kids. And I'm telling you, every single one, except for maybe one student out of 13 years, the anomaly, right? But all of them had a common denominator, and it was because well, my parents say this and do this here, but at home, they're this, they're this, they're this, they're this, and I don't want anything to do with it. You are your greatest, worst enemy when it comes to getting your kids to come. Just live it. Be about it. If you are, say you're a Christian, just be a Christian based on what the word says. It's not hard because your kids are watching, and they really. I don't listen to people who say one thing and do another.
It's true.
Nobody likes hypocrites. But yet we think in our own homes, well, it's okay. We like excuse ourselves from bad behavior, right? Because we're adults.
That's good.
And we're grown. But that bad behavior that we keep excusing because of our own whatever, our own unwillingness to fold to the word or whatever, we're only teaching them that it's okay. And then we're getting mad and punishing them for the same reasons why we don't want to change. So that was always what I saw. Who
do y'all feel as parents is the most influential person in a student's life?
The parents.
Absolutely. I'd 100% agree.
And I think I am so on board with like all the extra classes and youth ministry, because it does provide space for those friendships that are so needed. You know, it provides to teach them how to have social skills, and it teaches them how to worship God together in a corporate. There's so many benefits and an added bonus. But I think absolutely it's the parents.
I think that's where youth ministries themselves miss it. It's like the excellence of a student, the accomplishments, the ability to be Christ-like. If the parents in the picture is 100% dependent on the relationship with the parent. And I honestly feel like in a lot of our ministries that the focus should be more on the family.
Absolutely.
You know, like if we can have a healthy mom and dad, we can have healthy students.
Absolutely.
And you know, it reminds me of you know, when Solomon speaking in Proverbs, right? And he says, it's a little bit different, but he says, I've never seen the righteous forsaken or their descendants out begging for bread. And I would say in my head, like, I don't think I've ever seen godly parents who live it in behind closed doors and in public that had kids who weren't serving the Lord. Like I've just never seen it. And that youth pastor, no youth pastor, like when you find parents who live it, you find kids who do as well. And I think like for me, you know, growing up in this church, one of the greatest examples has been the Spencer family. You know, like when I look at individually their character and then I look at their parents and I look at Pastor Rana and I think about her stubbornness, her resilience, her ability to really practice that. I'm like, I see it all over. Like I see it in her now where like, I remember Pastor Rana, she would like, it was like she was so aggressive about holy things. You know, you meet so many people and they're like, they make God so dainty, right? They're like, you know, we just want to be good. But she was just like, no, we're going to serve the Lord. We're going to serve. She was really honest about that.
Him, so you're going to fear him.
And I see that in her now where it's like, you know, like it's that spirit of like, you know, you don't have to change who you are. But hey, sometimes we gotta take that stance, and she did that really well. And now you can see that just reverberate from generation to generation. And you know what? I wouldn't look and be like, well, you know, she's like that because of her youth pastor. I would say she's like that because of those parental influences in her life, even at a later stage in her life. How big that is. So like for parents, youth ministries are not raising your child.
Amen.
Sometimes there's a circumstance
for sure
where youth pastors really have to try to do both, you know, but on the generality of the whole situation, we're not raising them. We have them for 3 hours. The parents are the winners. The parents are the leaders. And any good youth leader is going to recognize that.
Absolutely.
And I even think parents have a part in playing the fun part of church. So that was one thing that Pastor Anna was incredible at, was fun. You could go to a huge long service, but in that 2 hours in between, you were eating and doing something fun.
Absolutely.
So like that's one thing that I've tried to pick up with my kids, just even little things like Sunday mornings, we were having a really hard time getting up, and we live, you know, a half hour from the church. I know. And we just conquered it. We have to get all of them up and then be there by 8 o'clock. And so they were, you know, they were moaning and groaning a little bit. And so one thing that perked them right up was breakfast at the cafe.
Yeah.
And so instead of being, oh, I don't want to get up, they'd be like, oh, do I get a bagel today? And I was like, yeah, you get a bagel today.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, even going to youth group, your kid doesn't want to do it. Create something fun around it. Go make it pizza night.
That's good.
Go get pizza before you all go to church together as a family, and then hit ice cream on the way home. Like, do something fun.
That's where they look forward to it.
Yeah, make church a fun. Like, connect, find out who. I ask my kids, who are you playing with in your class? Who are your friends? Who do you like? And if I like them, then okay, yeah, that would be a great friend for you to get closer. And I make a play date. Ask them to go out to lunch with you. Ask to meet them with you at the park. Like, do something fun sandwiched around church, because your goal is to keep them in church after they graduate. You have to be on purpose about their friends in church. Start when they're young, create those friendships, make sure there's boundaries, protect them from situations that they should never be in. And make it fun. Like, you know, like, there has to be, it's not just youth ministry that's in charge of being fun and crazy so they can draw your kids in. You have to put them in your car, feed them pizza.
Comes back to intentionality.
Yes, you have to, like, this is our biggest thing. Making our kids not hate
your
it.
First ministry.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if you're someone who works in ministry, you know, as a pastor. My kids, I could minister to all these people all I want to, but if I neglect my own kids and teaching them and explaining things to them, I've missed it.
Right. Absolutely.
So your kids are your ministry. They're your first and top priority.
Right.
So yeah, you need to be that model.
Absolutely. And especially if you do have your kids in ministry, because like I've heard parents be like, well, I don't want my kids to hate church if I force them to go. Like, my kids go to church every single day now. They live in the building and they love it.
My kids always ask. They actually like cry and throw a fit.
Mine too.
Then I'm annoyed by.
Like,
they're like, but I want to go to church. Why are you not going? Because it's a Monday night and no one's there.
It's like, no one's at the church.
You could
You're
go,
not missing anything.
The lights are off.
Yes, that's a real thing. So as a parent, we play a part in our friends and making it fun, making church fun, creating memories. And so I really believe that if this is something that you decide to do, maybe you haven't done it like this and you're in the teenager stage, it's okay. Like, they'll eat pizza with an attitude. It's fine. You know, and then go to church together. It's, you know, find out, talk to your youth pastor. Okay, who's in 8th grade? Tell me the kids that are in 8th grade. Like, can I reach out to the parents and we can do a hangout, or we can all go to the movies, or all go bowling or something. Be creative, be intentional, and try to reconnect your kids into the house of God so that when they're older, they're going to stay. So we just want to thank you for being with us. And if you have any ideas of anything that you'd like to hear about, that you'd like us to talk on, we really just want to make sure that you have all the resources that you need to help raise your children in the Lord. So thanks for being with us, and have a good day.